Preparations for Ireland's World Cup soccer campaign have been thrown into disarray after the captain Roy Keane.
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 Roy Keane was ordered home.
Roy Keane flew out for the 2002 World Cup as one of the biggest stars in football. His reputation preceded him. He was one of the fiercest competitors in the game, captain of one of the world's biggest clubs, and inspired his country throughout qualification. Many felt that a good World Cup could make Keane untouchable as the greatest to ever put on a green jersey. But things were far from perfect behind the scenes. Keane frequently clashed with the Republic of Ireland setup over the years, but nothing came close to the tension between him and his manager, Mick McCarthy. Their relationship was strained at best, but they managed to mostly keep a lid on it. But when Ireland kicked off their World Cup campaign, Keane was 12,000 kilometres away. McCarthy had sent him home. The captain of Ireland, the man who had driven them to this moment, would miss the World Cup his whole career had built towards. So, how do we get here? This is the story of how a few days on a volcanic island in the Pacific sparked a civil war on the other side of the world. It's a story of how preparation, frustration, and a decade of broken promises and miscommunication led to Ireland's best player missing the chance to walk the world's grandest stage, and ended up walking his dog instead. This is the story of Saipan.
I will not tolerate the level of abuse that was thrown at me. I have sent him home.
We got more contact on this than we did following 9/11.
After they're after sending him home, he just literally bursts into tears.
The reputation of our country, I think that this should be a referendum issue. It should be put to the people.
Hold on a minute.
Come back, Roy Keane.
I said, you're a liar. And I walked out of that room. And I walked out of my international career.
Keane and McCarthy were on opposite ends of the spectrum from their very first meeting at the US Cup in 1992. McCarthy was the ageing lieutenant of Jack Charlton, captain of the Italian 90 side that had captured the imagination of Irish fans by reaching the quarterfinals. Keane was part of the next generation. He felt the squad had enough talent to play a more expansive style and didn't have much time for Charlton. After a few bad games in the States, Keane and a few others blew off some steam. They stumbled onto the team bus, completely hammered, and McCarthy wasn't impressed. First trip, disgrace. Keane looked him up and down. First touch, disgrace. Keane's move to Manchester United began to shift his views on attitudes towards competing, however, and he'd grown tired of Charlton. His club teammates loved to laugh at the stories coming out of Ireland camps. Harry's challenge, the most infamous of all. The Irish squad allegedly competed to finish a huge plate of fish and chips to win a free dessert, just one day before playing Austria in a vital qualifier. Okay, look, it's probably harsh to blame some deep fried fish for the performance, but Ireland's late collapse killed their hopes of going to Euro 96 and marked the beginning of the end for Charlton's reign. McCarthy was his replacement, but once again, Keane and McCarthy failed to get off on the right foot. Keane chose to miss the next US Cup and told his club, who told the Football Association of Ireland. The message never reached McCarthy though, who said he didn't know where Keane was. This led to a media manhunt to try and find him. It turns out he's with the United squad, watching cricket. The FAI had allowed the message to fall through the cracks, but why Keane didn't feel comfortable telling McCarthy himself was the question on everyone's lips.
If I want to tell somebody something, I walk up to him, and I pick the phone up, and I tell him. That's the way I do it.
The Irish media wasn't impressed with this, and they began to ramp up their accusations that Keane would pick and choose his matches. Cathal Dervin even encouraged Irish fans to boo Keane in a match against Iceland. Some did, but Keane's talent won out as it often did, and they sang his name by the end. After missing out on the 98 World Cup and Euro 2000, the pressure was on as the country looked towards the World Cup in South Korea and Japan. In the meantime, Keane had been made captain, an olive branch of sorts, although he did manage to get sent off in his first game with the armband. Ireland faced a daunting group containing the Netherlands and Portugal, two of the best sides in Europe. Knowing that Ireland faced an uphill battle to qualify, Keane met with McCarthy after the draw had been made, making his case for a reform in how Ireland approached matches, which McCarthy agreed with. But, as Ireland began the campaign, Keane felt the training ground was still ancient and nutrition was stuck in the Charlton era. The team checked themselves in for their flight before playing the Dutch and flew economy, while the FAI chiefs sat in first class. Keane's mood didn't improve when he walked into the hotel dining room to find a stack of cheese sandwiches. All these years later, maybe Harry's challenge had been replaced by Mick's challenge. Either way, the match went better than the first time, and Ireland secured a 2-2 draw. Most were happy with how the game went, but Keane was fuming because Ireland had let a 2-goal lead slip.
We keep underestimating ourselves, and so, the good old Irish, they'll have a good time. But, we need to start winning matches.
Despite some other small bumps on the road, like a 3-hour layover in Andorra with the squad surrounded by Irish fans, Keane and McCarthy were a successful double act, an impromptu good cop, bad cop routine. McCarthy was approachable, offering an arm around the shoulder of the squad. He had played with guys like Niall Quinn and Steve Staunton, and was a mentor for young stars like Damien Duff and Robbie Keane. Keane was the standard setter, constantly demanding more from his teammates. Their dynamic culminated in a 1-0 win over the Dutch in Lansdowne Road, sealing Ireland's playoff spot and knocking out their illustrious opponents. This gave birth to the defining image of the McCarthy and Keane era. It's a stunningly awkward moment, with Keane looking like McCarthy had just given him a Lynx Africa set for Christmas, rather than potential qualification for the World Cup. The strange bedfellows had almost done it, but there was a tricky task of 2 legs against Iran to come. Keane was struggling with a knee injury and apparently agreed with Alex Ferguson and McCarthy that he would play the first leg but would skip the second if Ireland got an acceptable result. Ireland won 2-0 at home, but Keane told McCarthy he'd play the second leg. But when the day of the flight came, Keane changed his mind and told McCarthy he wouldn't be going. After making such an effort to get Ireland to this position, McCarthy was baffled by the sudden change of heart. Ireland just about got the job done without Keane, and they were heading to the World Cup. Yet another communication breakdown had chipped away at the relationship between captain and manager, and there wasn't much more for them to give. The playoff mess happened in the midst of Keane's most frustrating season yet at club level. Ferguson announced his retirement, and Keane contemplated following him out the door as his body began to creak under the load of a decade at the highest level. Ferguson did change his mind in the end, but the announcement overshadowed their season, and United went trophyless for the first time in 4 years. With all of this hanging over him, Keane declined the chance to play in Niall Quinn's testimonial in Sunderland. Missing the match didn't matter too much, but it meant Keane missed the squad briefing. This meeting was to let the squad know about Saipan, and their time there was mostly for relaxation and acclimatization to the conditions, before heading on to a more serious training base in Japan. But I'm sure it'll be fine, it won't come up later, it's fine, it's all good. So with Keane not in the best of moods, Ireland set out for their odyssey to the east. Roy even had time to have a go at some of the journalists who had criticised his testimonial absence during a layover. After 22 hours of travel, in first class thanks to Keane, they arrived on the idyllic island of Saipan. Just a couple of minor issues for a football team. There was no training gear and the pitch was a shambles, covered in potholes. McCarthy held a meeting to tell the players what was going on, and Keane went to his hotel room to complain about the situation. Just as US Marines had once stormed the beaches of Saipan during World War II, ready to impose their superior firepower, Keane arrived on the island, ready to impose his superior standards. Both faced fierce resistance, one from entrenched Japanese forces, the other from the FAI's "that'll do" approach to logistics. Back on the front lines, the squad can only run or get pissed, so they go hard at both. Keane's mood isn't improved by this, as some members of the squad were drinking until 5 AM with members of the Irish media, which sounds like Keane's personal hell. 10 years on from the US Cup, Keane was now the senior man, angrily awaiting his teammates' return, like your man when you told her you were only going out for 3 pints on Christmas Eve. The gear arrives a couple of days later, but the pitch is still in a state. FIFA officials said that they would have watered it, but somehow no one had told them Ireland would be training there. The training session ended with a match, and as you may have heard, a match needs goalkeepers. The problem was, the goalkeepers had started their training an hour earlier than the rest of the squad, and were tired. Keane already had the hump, as we know, and this was the straw that broke his back. He lost to the goalkeeping coach Packy Bonner and backup Alan Kelly, accusing them of skipping the work needed to compete at a World Cup.
11-year-old son came over to me and said, what's a fucking bollocks? I said, where did you hear that? And he said, Roy Keane just called one of those guys a fucking bollocks.
To be fair, maybe they were just scared of falling into one of the potholes. Either way, Keane had had enough and told McCarthy he was going home. McCarthy obliged and rang up Colin Healy, Keane's fellow Corkman, to replace him in the squad. In the meantime, Irish physio Mick, who often acted as a go-between for Keane and McCarthy, managed to talk him off the ledge. Keane was staying. But then he heard about Healy and felt bad, and McCarthy's comment that the squad might have to walk on eggshells in case he changed his mind again led him to change his mind again. Keane was going. The news leaked, and Keane fielded calls from his family, agent Michael Kennedy, and even Ferguson. You can just imagine Keane in his hotel room, picking the petals off a flower, saying, Mick loves me not. Mick loves me not. Okay, probably not, but either way he had made up his mind this time. Keane is staying. For some reason, Keane doesn't tell McCarthy this, but Kennedy has been in touch with FAI chief Brendan Menton. At 8 AM the next day, McCarthy is told Keane is staying. He sent Byrne down to check so that they can send off the final squad list, and Byrne confirms it. By the time Byrne returned though, a fax with Healy's name instead of Keane's had already been sent to FIFA. Not to worry though, the FAI in their infinite wisdom had already sent a squad list with Keane's name after speaking directly with Kennedy. They just didn't tell McCarthy about it, leaving him in the dark about what his own captain was doing. After a hectic 18 hours, Keane was back in, and poor Colin Healy was out. The danger had seemingly passed, but there was one last obstacle. Keane had agreed to do a couple of newspaper interviews while the rest of the squad went golfing. While they went looking for a hole-in-one, Keane was about to put a hole in his World Cup hopes. Keane was again heavily critical of the preparation for the World Cup, the choice of Saipan, the situation with the gear, and the standards accepted by his manager and the players. He wasn't talking about their golf handicap. Probably not what you want to hear from your captain on the eve of a World Cup. The interview with the Irish Times was meant to be part of an article that weekend, but its contents were dynamite. The paper published the interview in full the next day instead. Meanwhile, an oblivious Ireland squad went about their day, training and going out to watch Spider-Man in the cinema. They were in good spirits and were dancing on the tables while being serenaded by musicians during their team dinner that evening. McCarthy swung in and meandered through their travel plans to Zumo the next day. Then, he asked if anyone had anything they needed to get off their chest. Silence. McCarthy asked Keane directly if he wanted to speak. Keane began to shout, citing the poor standards allowed by McCarthy, annoyed at being tackled about the interview in front of the squad. McCarthy asked about the Iran game and why Keane had missed the most important game of their international careers. That was the spark this powder keg had been waiting for a decade. Keane started to cite the deal with Ferguson about a positive result and even brings up the Boston bust-up in 1992, but he was just getting started. The release valve was now open. Every frustration and perceived indignity Keane had faced with Ireland was about to come pouring out. He labelled McCarthy a stupid, incompetent con-man and that he'd join Irish squads late to avoid being around him. The rest of the squad sat there in silence, slack-jawed, heads down, mesmerised by Keane's anger. We'll never fully know the exact wording of his rant, but it went a little something like this. You're a fucking cunt. You're a fucking wanker. I didn't rate you as a player, I don't rate you as a manager, and I don't rate you as a person. You're a fucking wanker, and you can stick your World Cup up your arse. I've got no respect for you. You're a crap player, and you're a crap manager. The only reason I have any dealings with you is that somehow you're the manager of my country. You can stick it up your bollocks. That might not win any acting prizes, but you get the idea. McCarthy told Keane that if he had no respect for him, he couldn't play for him. Keane got up, told the squad they had their excuse now, and walked out. Not just from the room, but from the World Cup. The second battle of Saipan was over, and Keane's World Cup was the casualty. The squad applauded McCarthy to show their support, and Niall Quinn, Steve Staunton and Alan Kelly flanked him at a press conference, announcing their support for his decision to send Keane home, just after managing to pick their jaws up off the floor.
I've never witnessed anything like that in my life. And you know, there is a line, you can't cross it, and unfortunately, Roy has crossed it.
Predictably, the story exploded across the world, especially back home in Ireland. Taoiseach Bertie Ahern was even called on to get involved.
It would be just great if it can be reconciled. I do not know if it can or not.
This was now much bigger than just football. Keane and McCarthy became a vessel for a much larger debate. Families were divided, friendships lost, and radio phone-ins became the stage for the greatest debates of our time.
Cost. Major problem. I think the mother-in-law had to intervene to bring us back together.
We went our separate ways and we didn't speak to each other for nearly 2.5 months.
The guy at the bottom of the road now, all we do now to this day is nod to one another.
Do you think that Roy should apologise?
No, definitely not. He's nothing to apologise for.
Yeah, I think he's let himself down. I think in a couple of days he'll wake up and you wonder why he gave up the chance to play in the World Cup for Ireland.
He got us to the World Cup. McCarthy was there as a leader, but he's no leader now.
We're all very disappointed, you know, because at this stage he's let this country down, you know.
I think Roy Keane's been treated very badly in this. You know, Mick McCarthy's been a long-time pro. He should be able to take a more reasonable stance in it.
Do you feel as if you'd had a death in the family?
Going around like a bit of a zombie. Couldn't believe what was happening.
If we don't get a good result in this World Cup, it will look like the trailer for The Godfather Part 4. There will be blood everywhere.
You have just burned your MU shirt.
I have, yeah. In protest.
I think it's very sad, really.
You're obviously very upset about it.
I am.
I will be supporting Cameroon on Saturday morning, and I hope they kick the living daylights out of the Irish team.
While the rest of the squad headed off to Japan, Keane began his journey to the west. Some felt the situation was fixable, but there were literal oceans between the two men now. While all that was going on, FAI chief Brendan Menton was on his way to Seoul. He only learned Keane was on his way home as he was waiting for a connection in Amsterdam. When Menton finally landed in Japan, he backed McCarthy, but unbeknownst to him, the FAI back home were again working to bring Keane back. The FAI's poor preparation and communication had made this mess, and now they were falling over themselves trying to fix it. Noel Quinn wanted Keane back too, and managed to convince the squad to be open to it. McCarthy was still in the dark. Kennedy had continued his dialogue with the Black Ops sector of the FAI and organised a TV interview for Keane to get his point across. Keane was basically given a formula of what he would have to say to force McCarthy's hand and take him back, but Keane doubled down. He looked and sounded hurt, but made no apology and continued to criticise the standards in Saipan, believing himself to be 100% in the right. But he also didn't say he wouldn't go back.
I want to play for Ireland. We'll have to see. Possibly, yes. But there's nobody wants to play for much as Ireland as me. It's hurting you, this. Of course it's hurting me. Dead right it is.
The ambiguity of the interview led to the most farcical day of the whole debacle. FAI press officer Brendan McKenna held the first press conference of the day outside a team hotel to deal with the media. Just one issue. He had no idea Keane had done a TV interview or what was in it. McCarthy then spoke to the media in the second press conference and said he was open to Keane's return if he said sorry. He also hadn't seen the interview, but once he did, he decided the case was closed and gave the players an ultimatum. Roy or Mick? Who was in charge? Him or the Red Devil? The players backed Mick and wrote a supportive statement to be read out after McCarthy announced the final decision alongside Menton. Menton was in the wrong place again though, so it had to wait. In the meantime, McKenna held the third press conference of the day, a routine injury update. Seriously, what could go wrong? Well, no one had bothered to tell McKenna about the delayed press conference, so he handed out the player statements according to the original schedule. The last the public knew, McCarthy was open to Keane's return. Now his players were going against him.
Interests of the squad are best served without Roy's presence.
Quinn panicked and called Kennedy to explain the mistake. So now Kennedy had to convince Keane that the players who just told him to go away actually really want him back. In the meantime, Quinn called the fourth press conference to explain what had happened to the media.
For a reason we don't know how yet and why, that it came out way too soon. It was to follow Mick's press conference, and it would sit far easier after Mick's press conference than it does now.
Kennedy called him back after. There's still a chance, but Quinn has to convince McCarthy, who believed the case was closed. The pressure told, and McCarthy relented, but he still needed that apology. Menton finally rocked up, and it was time for the fifth and final press conference of the day.
To do a one-on-one and give your opinion and impressions of what happened is a lot easier than facing a media conference 15-20 minutes after an incident, an hour after, or coming in here last night when people were on the hunt.
Menton is terrified that McCarthy would say something to scupper Keane's return and essentially gagged him during the press conference. After a painful 11 minutes, he brings proceedings to a close. A disaster had turned into a farce, with McCarthy looking like he was held at gunpoint in front of the world. The ransom? Keane's safe return to Japan. Keane's frustration with Ireland being a laughingstock had ironically created the most ridiculous story of them all. But the day of the 5 press conferences was finally over. Everyone was now waiting for one phone call. If Keane made it, McCarthy would be forced to take him back, given how weak his position now was. The squad just wanted a resolution, one way or the other. Keane was back, if he wanted to be. One phone call. It came. But it wasn't Keane. It was Kennedy. The dream was over. Roy wasn't returning. Without their star man, Ireland came through a tough group unbeaten, drawing with eventual finalist Germany. They met Spain in the next round, falling short on penalties. Some felt Ireland could have achieved great things if Keane had been there, as he gave the team a different mentality. Others felt his absence gave the squad freedom, and some players played at a level above what they normally would. It was a strong Ireland side, but the sad reality is we'll never truly know what heights Keane could have propelled them to. What stuck out while researching the story is just how many chances there were to address things before it all went wrong. Keane missed a squad meeting detailing Saipan, but no one seemed to follow up to let him know the details. If he was concerned about time away, surely he could have skipped this part of the trip and linked up with the team in Izumo for the proper training. It's not like he hadn't had special treatment before. While in Saipan, Keane had done a public interview, so probably shouldn't have been surprised that he was challenged about it publicly, and he easily could have cancelled the interviews in the context of a tense situation. At the same time, McCarthy knew how close Keane was to boiling point and could have been a bit more pragmatic with how he approached it. But with so much said and unsaid over the years, perhaps he just reached his own limit with Keane, the same way Keane reached his limit with him. Keane's history of spats since then, from Alex Ferguson to John Walters, seems to play in McCarthy's favour a bit. On the other hand, Keane's demands with Ireland weren't exactly outrageous, and McCarthy could have been more proactive in ensuring they were met. If either man could have remained a bit cooler, Keane would have arrived in Izumo and seen the state-of-the-art facilities there, the answer to all of his prayers. Whatever the case, both men had allowed things to fester for too long. Saipan was simply the final point on a collision course that had been plotted a decade prior. As always, the FAI have their own role to play. Their culture of casual professionalism was from a bygone era. The splintered reaction of them once Keane had left exposed their incompetence, with various parties with different agendas working independently and not talking to anyone else. Following the World Cup, McCarthy was offered a bumper new contract, but by November, he'd resigned following poor results and fan pressure. Brendan Menton was gone a couple of weeks later following the Genesis report. Keane returned to the Ireland setup after that, but would never play in another international tournament, and Ireland haven't been back to a World Cup since. Saipan sent shockwaves through football, and it's difficult to argue with McCarthy's assessment that it will define their entire World Cup and be discussed for a century. It's an inescapable part of the legacy of both men, despite their achievements in the game and the passage of time. The story has inspired books, documentaries, a play, and even a movie, and it's still a heated topic in Ireland. So now it's your turn to answer the question that's split the country for over 2 decades now. Whose fault was it? If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. A lot of effort went into this video. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, all those things. And yeah, I'm hoping to do more videos like this, not just about Irish football, but football in general, because I love the kind of mix of history and football. So if you've got any ideas, stories that you'd like to be told, I'm all ears. Thanks again, and I will talk to you soon.